Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kashawn Hopkins. I'm an instructional technology specialist from Oklahoma Public School Resource Center. And today I'm going to talk about the technology integration framework called TPACK. I'm also going to be joined here with my colleague. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Kurt Bernhardt. I'm the Director of Technology for OPSRC, and Kashawn and I make up the tech team here. If you have any needs for technology, just reach out to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to help, and you can do so through techteam@opsrc.net. You should be able to get either me or Kurt through that, and we'll try to respond as best as we can to handle your needs. If you want access to these slides, which I typically recommend them for all of my usual tech talks, they're filled with all sorts of links and resources and goodies, but I feel like this is especially true for this one. I think I tried to design these slides so you can use it as sort of a reference document. So I refer to a couple of things here and there. It's just nice to have it all packaged together in one place. So I'm going to copy this bit here. And I'm going to read it out just real quick because it is case sensitive. So lowercase t period ly /5 5RSE is the last four letters right over there. If you have that, you should have access to this. Additionally, it's going to be on our Tech Talks page, which I'll show a little bit later. There's going to be time and place for that. So for those who have no idea what TPACK is, it is a framework that you can use to introduce technology into your classroom. And it relies heavily on these three sections, these three domains here, and it's the different it's three things that you'll need to have successful technology integration in your classroom here. The first of which here, and it's not necessarily the most important one, but it's just the one, just kind of reading out this wonderful acronym that they've put us together, is technological knowledge. So this is what technology is available to you. What are you trained on? What do you know? What do you feel comfortable with? What are some things you can bring to the classroom? What things are available to you in terms of like hardware? Then we have over here, content knowledge domain over here. So these are things like, you know, the standards, what are students trying to learn on here? And then there's the pedagogical knowledge. So this is like, what is the best way for students to learn? So these can all work separately, but where the magic really happens in TPACK, and it's one of the reasons why I think it's so beneficial to keep this in mind as you're designing out lessons and just kind of planning things out, planning these experiences for students, is the intersection between these different domains here. As an educator, especially if you've been doing it for a while, you're probably really aware of the bottom relationship here, the pedagogical content knowledge. This is where we typically work a whole lot, is how do we teach students what we need to teach them, but in kind of like the most optimal way. Because if you kind of separate these, like if you don't try to intentionally blend these two, you're trying things out and not entirely sure what the results are going to be until the end of the day. You're like, oh, these students didn't learn what they were supposed to learn here. So it's important to kind of blend those two domains and just have them in close relationship with each other. And so try to imagine that relationship, but with that added dimension of technology there. You want to have these relationships as close as possible, because the ideal here is the middle here, which is TPACK. So combining all of those knowledge areas as closely as possible. So I love this. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of beautiful in a way, because it's all about that relationship between these different domains here. I want to break these down even further. I'm going to try to give you something that you can apply a little bit later. I just wanted to give you something to hang your hat on so you know whether or not this is going to be worth your time. So a little bit of a schedule of events here. First of all, I'm going to do my introduction, which I've already done. I'm going to go into my objectives, so that will get rid of my beginning stuff. Then I will sort of spend this whole time building some arguments here and then adding in some applications. So where I'll start is the most broadest place. Why use a technology integration framework? You might be already convinced, which is why you're here. But you might have some colleagues that, you know, might have been doing something a certain way for a while. And I just want us to grapple with this question of like, why do we even bother with the framework? Why do we bother learning this? Why are we adding this on top of all the wonderful things that we're trying to do here? And so I try to address that first. Next, I get a little bit more specific. So why do we use the TPACK model? I try to talk about what's specifically good about this. Then I start breaking down its little components and talk about technology, pedagogy, content, just breaking it down. But where the fun starts to happen over here, where the pavement hits the road, are the intersection places right over here. I start to talk a bit about those. Then I will move into applications, which was a ton of fun to kind of put together. This felt like a scavenger hunt when I was putting it together. So this is where I feel like a lot of the resources that I've been talking about in terms of like what's in the slides themselves are here. Then I wrap things up with just a little bit of advice, just something for us to land on, some solid terra firma there. I give links to extension activities or just ways to kind of recap things that I've talked about, or alternative explanations, just in case I don't hit the bell there. Link to the evaluation, and answer any questions I might have. So I will warn you, this one is a little longer than my usual tech talk. So if you're used to it still being around 30 minutes, it's going to be a little bit longer on this one, just because there's just so much to unpack here. So if you do have to head out, I do want to remind everybody there's going to be recording. In fact, you probably got that noticed right before I started speaking that we're going to have this recording here. So without further ado, plenty to talk about here. So let's jump in. All right, first, my objective, I gotta have it. After this training, teachers will be able to apply the 7 components of the TPACK model to integrate technology into the classroom. Now, don't be freaked out by that. I say 7 components, which I know sounds like a lot, but it's really those 3 domains here. So technology, content, pedagogy, their intersections between each other, and that kind of like idealized version in the middle, TPACK. So don't freak out. It's really just these 3 sections and then the relationships between them. But I wanted to specify it here because I do think it's important to really put some intentional thought into each part of this individually and each part of them as the relationship with each other, and then how they kind of meld together into one model here. Okay, so let's talk about frameworks here. Frameworks are used in all sorts of different domains and disciplines. Try to imagine one discipline that you might be familiar with. Let's say, for example, that you need to design a kitchen. Now, we all have kind of like a vague idea of what kitchens are, what they have in it, what they're supposed to be used for. But let's say, for example, you got to design a successful, functional kitchen that's supposed to last you for a long time. But there's a couple of things that you have to address when you're trying to think of what actually goes in the kitchen. What are some nuts and bolts that you need to have in there? So yeah, you have to think about questions like, what appliances that you need? What do those appliances need? What kind of power output? How do we get water going to for your room over here? What kind of utensils and things that you need? What are some specific measurements? You want to also think about what makes your kitchen successful. What parameters can we use to kind of measure success? What does success look like in the kitchen there? Or what are some things that you need to account for, because your appliances aren't going to last forever. You have to think about, okay, how do I figure out what I need in here? How do I replace some things if I need it? What are my plans for there? Or even kind of in a broader sense, like how does this kitchen compare to other people's kitchens on here? Is that how I can measure success? What can I learn from that? And if I do want to talk about kitchen stuff with other people, like how do I have that shared language? So I'm kind of using kitchen as kind of like a concrete example of something we can think about. But I try to think about frameworks in this way as well. Like you might already use some teaching and learning frameworks in there, just kind of like being able to design out your lesson plans, or you might use that to develop curriculum on here. And I kind of think of technology integration frameworks as the same way. Like it's something that you can use to build a plan. It's something that you can use to measure success. It's something that is and I think TPACK does a good job of this. It is something that if you are intentionally thinking of these three parts, you're not going to be missing a component that you absolutely need, because it would be a real shame to put all your stuff in this kitchen. And you're like, wait a minute, I might have forgotten to get electricity, so nothing is going to work in this kitchen here. And so it's just a helpful way to kind of keep all of these different components in mind and interacting with each other. And I feel like this works the same way here. But moreover, on this argument on here, I'm not the only one that's saying that. There's other people, like, for example, the organization, the U.S. Office of Educational Technology. They've been saying for a long time, and in their technology plan, which I do have a link to that. I think it's a wonderful resource there, but they did say integrated technology should be used to transform learning experiences with the goal of providing greater equity and accessibility. It's all about trying to reach more people than you did before. I imagine what people are doing in the classroom is really working for some students, but there are some students that, you know, you need to figure out, you need to modify what you're doing. You need to make it as individualized as possible, and you need to, but still broad enough to reach to the other students in your classroom. You're trying to access as many students as you can with the content that you're trying to provide. It's the reason why we try to develop the pedagogy side of our educational experiences that we're creating, because we're trying to reach as many students as we can, as effectively as we can. We want to turn them into masters of that content so they can apply it into situations we're trying to anticipate for. And so just a couple of points on here real quick. All of these technology integration frameworks, I'm talking about TPACK now, but there are other ones like SAMR, the TIM model, PICRAT. There's all sorts of wonderful stuff out there. All of them are research-based, so they are living processes, living thoughts, living documents here that are being developed on, that are being researched. Their numbers are being applied to them. There's qualitative and quantitative research being done on them as we speak. So it's real easy to just kind of go out there and find and see what people are doing in other classrooms in other countries, to see how they're getting success from this. So really good stuff here. If you're ever interested to see what other people are doing with this, it's really easy to look for them. You could just like go to Google Scholar or something like that, or your favorite research search engine. Another thing that I like about all of these frameworks is they allow creativity and autonomy within structure. So the framework is providing the structure, but they never specify like what tools they use. They don't push a specific thing. They say, take a look at your situation here. You're the expert on here. You're the educator. And it's kind of your expertise that's kind of pulling, allows you to pick the right tool for the right job. I repeat that a whole lot in a lot of my other tech talks. And so you're able to, you know, use that knowledge that you have about your students and apply, and you already know what the content's going to be. And so you're able to apply that technology to fit that situation the best. And of course, at the very end, all of these support digital literacy, very broad term on that. But the basic idea is that we're trying to prepare our students, not just for today's problems or yesterday's problems that are here, but problems that we have no idea are going to pop up on us. These are ill-defined problems that we have here. And we need to prepare our students to kind of take in those situations and try to say, okay, what are some possible solutions? What tools are accessible to me? And when you introduce those technology tools to those students, you give them something, you empower them with something that they can reach into, and they go, oh, you know, that one time that I was in Mr. So-and-so's class or Mrs. So-and-so's class, and I remember us using Google Docs as sort of a collaborative thing with a couple of my peers. Maybe I can do something like that to solve this problem, or start brainstorming, getting the ideas going here. So that is my argument for technology integration frameworks. Let's talk a little bit specifically about TPACK. So, you know, I'm going to switch these two just to remind you what this looks like so we don't get lost in the sauce. Remember, this is 3 different domains here: technology, pedagogy, content, and then we're going to be looking at the relationships between them. So for TPACK, why would you specifically go for this model? So one of which is how I've basically described what TPACK is. It accounts for the 3 components. You need pedagogy in there. You need that content section in there. And if you want to integrate technology, you need some knowledge about the technology itself as well. But this part over here about emphasizing their relationships is great because, whenever you learn content, when you learn knowledge, it's kind of like when students learn, how to do something in your classroom, like write an essay or use or develop a formula. You want to give them that kind of like a broader context, like how does this connect to other things related, and how is this relatable? How do I use something like this? So that's why I think this is kind of a really cool model here, because it emphasizes that relationship. Additionally, it builds on existing instructional design. The PACK part, PCT, the pedagogy content stuff is actually older than the TPACK model. The TPACK model is actually built out of that. So I don't remember off the top of my head who actually kind of coined that term. I'll look a little bit for that later. But the fact that it's based off of something that's already been just heavily researched, and it's something that you already use. So this is really just an extension, an enhancement of what you're already probably doing in your classroom here. And additionally, I think TPACK actually plays nicely with other technology integration frameworks on here. I feel like TPACK provides the breadth. So these are these different domains to consider. And I talked about SAMR model last week, so check that out. It'll be on the TechTalk page if you're interested. But a lot of people tend to know about SAMR models, one of the more popular models out there. But I feel like SAMR model provides the depth here. So yeah, you want to consider the technology, but how far do you want to go? How complex do you want that to be? So it's really up to you. You can combine models and kind of pick the core aspects of them and just try to get kind of like a more fully realized version of what technology integration looks like specifically for your classroom. Okay, doing okay on time. All right, I've talked enough about the why. Let's start breaking down into tiny little pieces, because I think as we move on to this model, as we try to get some applications on it, I want to make sure that at least you have the foundation, you understand kind of what these different domains look like by themselves, and then how you can consider them together. And I tried to frame this in terms of questions you could ask yourself. One of the creators of TPACK, which I didn't put it on here, but that's fine. I know I have it on my TPACK goodies page here. So their names are, I'm sorry if I messed this up, Punya, Mishra, and Matt Koehler on here. In fact, I'm pretty sure he's a doctor. So I'm gonna put doctor on there and I'll fix that later. Well, you'll see the updated version of this if you're watching the recording on here. But those two people put together, kind of coined the term of TPACK. And lost my train of thought on that. But at the very least, they're the ones who created this. And I want to make sure that we get these separate pieces here. So when we start putting them together, we'll have an idea of what we're working with here. And so I tried to frame these as questions because I think, oh yes, Dr. Mishra, he had mentioned that he thinks TPACK, a good kind of like first step on using it is sort of a test to figure out whether or not you are incorporating these three different parts here. So that's why I try to frame these as questions you can kind of ask yourself. You can self-assess and see kind of where you're at in terms of how are you integrating technology in your classroom. So without further ado, let's jump in. We have content knowledge on here. So this one's, if you've been doing this for a while, this is kind of a no-brainer. This is what must students learn. These come in the form of like standards, district curriculum that you have on here, but don't forget social skills should definitely be added in there as well. So it's not just, math, English, writing, all that stuff. That stuff is great. But also social skills, important part of it, that kind of like emotional development. So, we're training up people here. We got pedagogical knowledge. So these are, what are the best ways for students to learn? Another way that, excuse me, hot button word that's thrown around a whole lot is those best practices that are there. What are some best practices out there? And this is teachers with tons of experience that they've been doing this for a while probably know this quite well. They might not know like the specific theories and the terms on this one, but just kind of like intuitively, they've had so much practice on figuring out how do we make this work. But of course, new teachers that come in over here can help bring in and update some of those practices in there. Just kind of, they have more tools available to them. They just need that experience to be combined together there. And then technological knowledge here. So this is what technology tools are available to me. This is something that, you go to a district and it might be some hardware there, or you might be able to search for some software, some tools out there, or you might be able to leverage some partnerships. Yeah, this is just what's available out there. And I feel like there are experts. Something that kind of got my brain going when I was doing research on TPACK is that there are experts in each one of these fields that I feel like you should leverage that relationship that you might have with them. Like, for example, content knowledge on there. I think teachers can do a pretty good job on all of these things, but like in terms of like content knowledge, sometimes like if you don't have the background, like for example, me, I started out as a teacher. I was teaching math for a while, but I didn't have like the experience of like an engineer, someone who's like applies some of this stuff, or like an architect, or like so these different jobs that like use math as the basis of everything that they're doing there. So, you'll be able to reach out to those relationships and leverage them and maybe bring people into your classroom. Like for example, the program FutureLink, really good stuff on there. And you can bring those experts in, those subject matter experts, and just get a little bit more value out of this section. Or pedagogical knowledge. I've already kind of described this a little bit here. Like, you have those expert teachers that have the experience, and then kind of the new teachers that are over here that are kind of bringing in those theories in there, bringing in all these different tools, some new stuff in here, and it just needs the experience. You can work together, new teachers, old teachers, and try to figure some stuff out between the both of you. And then technological knowledge on here. The experts here would be like your IT specialists, your technology specialists on here, your tech coaches. There are so many resources out there that they have. And, we got a little something, so I might as well plug that right over here. We do have, I'm doing a tech talk right now, but there are other tech talks that we've done as well. So just to show you, just to take a moment to show you our tech talk page. This is at opsrc.net/tech talks, which I'll provide a link for that a little bit later. But yeah, it has this. It has our upcoming tech talks that we have here. I already talked about TPACK. We have our ISTE standards that are coming up. You can suggest a future technology tool, but also down over here, we have all sorts of other technology tools that we've already kind of discussed, tried to break down, give you enough so you could start to introduce it into your classroom on here. And of course, you could just talk to me or Kurt. If you're just like, hey, I'm trying to do this. What are some tools? Let's do a little brainstorm. Let's start working. Let's start workshopping. Let's try to figure out like, how do I introduce this into my students on here? That is some conversations we would love to have. So keep in mind, you have some technology knowledge right at your fingertips right at this moment. So keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about intersection. So these are questions that I've tried to frame in a way that kind of forces you to think about the relationship between these different domains that we have here. First of all is the one that you're probably the most familiar with, pedagogical and content knowledge. So a question you might be able to ask yourself is, how is instruction facilitated in content areas? What is the best way for your students to learn? Is it small group instruction? Is it kind of full classroom stuff? Do you have the classroom management to have students kind of like build things by themselves? Can they handle working on projects? So these are questions that you could kind of grapple with and kind of mess around, or like train your students to kind of like work their way up to something, kind of like an idea on what works best for them. And that can work on a group level or an individual level as well. Like, what are some accommodations that you can make? So that's one. Now I want to start bringing in technology in here. We have technological, pedagogical. That's a mouthful on that knowledge. On this one, I asked the question, how is technology integrated in the content areas? When you are trying to find technology tools on here, how does it reinforce some of the things that you're trying to do in your classroom? I'm using math again because that's my background. But like if you want students to make a graph, something like that, what are some tools that reinforce that idea, that allows them to learn what they're supposed to learn in kind of like a nice, concise, easy way that's easy to them, so they're like willing to pull up this tool whenever they do need it and apply it to solve the problem here. And then finally, technological content knowledge. A question that I framed for this is, how is technology selected and managed throughout the learning experience in here? And this is, at least for me personally, I know that this can be, this is a question to really kind of like grapple and struggle with here, because whenever you're introducing anything into your classroom, you're taking a certain level of risk here. Because it's hard to really know how students are going to react in certain ways. And so you want to select the right tool, because if you're using a tool that's not compatible with what you're trying to teach, they're going to be at odds with each other, and you're going to waste your time. You're going to throw away the technology, say, that didn't work, and it'll end up being a waste of time for you and your students. I know we're in a time where we can't afford that. Additionally, there's the management aspect of this. Like when you do introduce this technology, how do you make sure that this is something that they're going to take from your classroom and apply it in other situations? How do we foster that relationship that students are going to have with a piece of technology in a positive, responsive way here? So questions to grapple with. It's not easy, but at the very least, if you are thinking about it intentionally, then you're getting value out of this TPACK. And then finally, I tried to sum it up, and then I'm going to bring up something called learning activity types, which is kind of like, I feel like is an activated version of TPACK here. So finally, the TPACK piece right over here, when you're pulling everything together, one question that you should ask yourself is, how does technology support the what and the how students learn on here? So it's all kind of putting this together in this lovely little technology integration casserole that we've developed here over time. And this is one answer, and I'm using this for my applications on here, but that is definitely not the only answer. If you do a little bit of research out there, if TPACK is resonating with you, educators have come up with wonderful responses on how to take this TPACK model, which is a conceptual model. Really, you're just kind of asking yourself questions and kind of designing things out based on that questions and making sure you're not forgetting anything. But how do you activate this knowledge? Because right now it's just, what do we know? How do we do this stuff? And one answer to that, and it's not the only answer to that, is learning activity types. Some lovely people, Judy Harris and Mark Hoffer, I have a reference down there below to their activity types website, which in fact, let me open that up, because I'm gonna refer to it in a minute. But they have created 9 curriculum-based taxonomies that are designed to apply TPACK. And so this is things like K-6 literacy, mathematics, music, physical education, social studies, science, secondary English language arts, visual arts, world languages, all of these lovely things here they've created, and these are fantastic. So taking a look at the time, I see I'm at the 30-minute mark. So if you do have to head off somewhere, I know it's during lunch right now, you're very welcome to. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going and do some applications. But real quick, I did mention it, but I wanted to make sure people had the address, if they had to leave, opsrc.net/TechTalks. That's where these recordings are going to be, or you could reach out to me and Kurt. We can also kind of direct you if you need to, techteam@opsrc.net. So going to copy that out for anybody to have. But let me show you learning activity types just real quick, because this is cool stuff. So this is a website dedicated to the application of TPACK. They kind of explain how to use some of this stuff on here, but I'm going to skip a little bit here and go straight to the activity types, which is a section right over here in the middle on the left-hand side here. So the way that you use this, I think, is you find a section, that applies to your subject here. So I'm going to click mathematics. You got it in English. They also have it in some other languages on here if you're lucky. And then click on whatever one that you can read here. And the way that they have these is they have these different sections depending on what student actions are going to be. And if you've seen my SAMR model one already, this is kind of a little bit of what I was going on. The focus is on what are students doing, provide a bit of pedagogy here, and then reinforce that with technology on here. So like, for example, the very first thing is attend a demonstration. So this is the simple, teachers in front of the classroom, they're in front of a whiteboard or something like that. They're writing out the problem, they're breaking down the steps, standard stuff here. This gives a little brief description, so you have an idea of what the students probably should be doing on here. This gives you kind of a litmus test to figure out, okay, is this activity that we're doing what's being described here? And then bring in some technology on here. Okay, what are some technologies that can enhance that experience, that activity that students are going to be doing? So things like document cameras do it. You could do interactive tools on here, like they mentioned Explore Math. I really like, oh gosh, what's that Manipulatives website? I'm going to remember later and feel silly because I really like it, but yeah, I'll move on. You could do a presentation software. You can use Google Slides to help you with that. You could use videos to help you. Like Khan Academy, you could do video clips, video conferencing as well. You can do it over Zoom. Zoom has like whiteboards that you can have access, so you can do it asynchronously. So it's not just in the classroom now. Now technology is creating a space that you can do it online as well. So fantastic stuff. And it groups these activity types. So under the consider activity type, it gives you a little description on things that the students are doing to consider information, but it gives you a bunch of activities down here, and it breaks them down into these little groups. So we got the consider group, we have the practice group, we have the interpreting group, producing group, applying group. So there's so many little groups that they have. And so they've built out all of these activities types on here. And so what I have done for you lovely people. So first of all, thank you so much for listening to me talk about TPACK and blather on about some of these things. Sometimes I get on my soapbox a little bit, and I think that's okay for that I have on here. So I appreciate you listening to me on here. But let me give you some applications that I've pulled from these learning activity types on here. So I've just pulled in one thing, and I started to apply some technologies. I'm doing a little bit of a technology brainstorm. So when I am designing a lesson that I feel like it applies to these activity types, I can just go, oh, yeah, my students have already have a little bit of practice in Google Docs. I know they've been using it in other classes, something like that. I could just pull that tool and use that for this lesson that I have here. That way I make sure that everything is being accounted for. So I'm going to do this by subject. I just pulled one thing and then started applying a couple of technologies to it. So for K through 6 literacy on here, one activity would be vocabulary analysis. You got to take a couple of words and kind of understand, okay, how are these words related? What are some meanings that you have on here, and different ways that you can explore it here, possible technologies. We have word processing software like Google Docs. We got concepting mapping software like Koehler is great for that. Educational software that can kind of be specific in a way, like if you have a textbook, you can pull technology from that. We have drawing software. Seesaw has a wonderful suite of drawing tools on there that just like it gives you plenty of examples to explore the meaning of vocabulary words on there. Interactive whiteboards. Nearpod does a great job at that. If you have kind of a one-to-one situation in your classroom, if you have the hardware to spare on that one, Nearpod is great because you're able to pose like a word or pose something on there and have students explore it on their own, and then you can kind of pull them together into sort of like small group situations or classroom situations on there. And so this is kind of how you can kind of think through the rest of TPACK, because this is where the ideas start flowing here. Right, let me do another one. Of course, I got to do math. I got to do one. One of these is do a demonstration. And I'm talking about the student doing a demonstration. They've gone through the process, they've listened to you talk, they've gotten some practice. Now it's time for them to show instead of tell possible technologies that can reinforce that. I put Nearpod on here, interactive whiteboard, of course, but you can also try alternatives. So this is where we start thinking a little bit outside of the box. How about we have students create a video where they display kind of the process that they have to go through, or where does this formula, where can this be applied? So Adobe Spark is great for that. By the way, some of these technologies that I mentioned on here, I put them on there because I have an idea of what all this stuff is, because they're all on the Tech Talks page. Yeah, so if you ever need some reinforcement on any one of these things, I've already talked about some of them stuff. Document camera, not only that you can use a physical one, but additionally, they typically Zoom, like for example, right now, I'm sharing my screen. You can do that through Zoom. You can do that through Google Meet as well. We can do presentation software, have them develop a couple of slides to kind of show you what are the steps. Like, you know, in a math class, you got to ask your students, what are the steps? Show me the steps. And you can have them dedicate each slide to each step. It's fantastic stuff on there. You could have them develop a podcast on here. Audacity is great for that, for sound recording and developing. And on the Mac side of it, we have GarageBand as well. And of course, got to throw in a YouTube video in there, and you can have your students create their own videos on them. So good stuff there. Okay. But then I also, as I was developing, I was like, okay, you got to do the core stuff. Hopkins, let's do an English thing, let's do a math thing. But one of the really cool things about this website is the fact that it includes all of these other ones that I, just in my personal opinion, tend to be kind of overlooked. Like, for example, physical education. A type of activity they would do is imitate or execute the mechanics of a motor skill. So something like this is they've learned kind of a process like how to do a squat, how to do a proper squat that you can't hurt, that you won't hurt yourself as you're doing it. Or, you know, if you're practicing kind of like I think of this as like a volleyball, what they mentioned over here. What's your stance? What's your follow through? How do you land in a way that you don't hurt yourself? So there's lots of ways that you can approach this. Like, for example, do a recording. And you could do this online. Flipgrid actually kind of enables this. It's typically used for like online video discussions, but you can also use it to where students can record themselves doing the process, explaining the process, breaking it down and making it theirs. We got websites on here, of course, YouTube. Great stuff for that, and they're able to apply it in there. You can create a little channel for your students and they can upload videos into there. And I had to include this. Once I heard the name, I'm like, oh, didn't realize that had a name attached to it. But Xer games, where you have a game that is way more physical, that's built based off the physicality of the game, like Wii Sports, anything that's based off of the Kinect for Xbox, anything that's based off of the Move for PlayStation. You're having your students do these physical actions on here. And there's actual people doing research on these, on how to create curriculum around Xer games. So really super fascinating stuff in there, at least for me personally on there. So great things. People are using technology to kind of reinforce these ideas, and there's so many more. This is just one example out of a full document full of these activities that I think you should explore. All right, looking at my time, making sure that I stay on here. I don't want to go over 45 on here. Let's do visual arts. Love visual arts. Activity type would be just to visit. How powerful it is to have your students, you know, go on a little field trip and just explore out these museums and have them walk around and take in a bit of history, see how things are built out. Try to give them experience that they would not normally have in their home life or in the classroom on here. And this isn't just limited to, you know, having them sign up, fill out these permission slips and take them on a bus and travel them out. I know logistically that can be a nightmare, but there's some great stuff out there that technology will allow your students to access all this great stuff, either from their home or from the classroom. So things like online art galleries is just a normal thing. Typically a museum will have just stuff available on their website for students to explore, to mess with. There's some really great stuff out there, digital archives that they have on here. They have web quests that I feel like are really good to explore. And you can have students could go in. Some of these softwares have kind of like ways that you can explore these different field trips. They can even create their own, like do an Adobe Spark, maybe have them explore their neighborhood and build something on that one, or have them do a podcast. You can create that through Audacity and then publish it on a different website, on a different service. You could do a screen capture through Zoom. You could do virtual field trips through Nearpod. There's some really great stuff. So like if you have access to VR headsets in there, you could do it on that. Okay, one last one. World languages. So love me some world languages. On there, you have so many students, like you have diverse populations in a lot of schools on there, and world languages is a way to kind of like tie in. This is how you really reach out to some people, because sometimes, you know, those students that are learning English on there, they feel isolated. They feel like, you know, the way that I express myself authentically, it's hard to do because I have to do everything in English. I have to do it this one specific way. And I feel like the ones in world languages really just tries to bring in that student experience. It allows them to find motivation because they're working through kind of developing their identity, which is so important for students up here. So I picked the example of creating like a newspaper or a news magazine, a brochure, a comic, something like that. So students are building something that other people are going to look at, and you can design it in different languages depending on what the student is, like what their experience is. So you can do things like word processing software. I put documents on there, but just to mix it up, Jamboard's great. You can do a bunch of sticky notes. Anything that uses Microsoft's immersive reader is fantastic because they already have that built-in like picture dictionary thing, and translation tools to kind of like help you out if the teacher doesn't know all those languages, but at the very least you can translate it and get some of that meaning on there. You can. It's good stuff. There's also desktop publishing software, so things that you can use to create documents. So Canva works for this. Adobe Spark, wonderful suite that works there. Or if you have access to it, you know, things like Adobe InDesign. Adobe has tons of like a whole suite of tools that reinforces this software on here. We got web authoring software, so publishing a website or a blog, so Blogger and Google Sites work well for that. And there's lots of like free tools that have things built into it, and I've done a couple of tech talks on those as well. And comic creation software, so things that will help you develop and work inside of a layout. Book Creator is fantastic, I think, for that one. Like it's literally built for something like that one. And Book Creators is very aware that they have an audience that reaches out in a bunch of different languages. So you'll see tons of resources that you can just kind of pull in. Like the whole thing of like having a book read to somebody in a different language is so powerful on there when you're developing that language. All right, I got 2 more minutes. Thank you, everybody. Huge thank you. Let me wrap this up here because I've gone real deep here. Let me just kind of take a step back, give you a little breathing room. You've listened to me blather on about this stuff, and I really do appreciate that. Some real things, some small things to kind of hang your hat on, though. Some smart starting advice here. I've given you 5 points. Start small. There's no need to go big on all of these parts on here. If it just kind of work, and I think this kind of builds into the second point really well. Let them play, and not just them as in the students, but also give yourself an opportunity to work with some of these tools to get some practice with this stuff in kind of like the lowest stake environment that you possibly can have. Now, by playing through it, you'll run into some spots where you're like, ooh, I'm not so strong at this. I like the tool, but I know that I personally have some reservations on that one. That's fine. And use that to anticipate support. How are ways that you can leverage relationships or leverage expert advice to support you out? You know, people at OPSRC might try to help you out with something like that, just throwing that out there. And as you work through these process, like I said before, you're taking a risk. So please be patient as you're working through this. These different pieces of technology, you don't want to throw in there all at the same time. But even if you're just working with one, sometimes you just got to work at that over time and just kind of let this process take a life on its own. And at the very end, focus on the purpose. At the end of the day, what are your students getting out of this? Are you accessing, are you allowing your content to be more accessible to more students? So keep that in mind as you're working right through. Your students are always going to be the center, and it's never going to be the technology or the content or the pedagogy. It's your students that are the center of this. Okay, I'm out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Last pages that we have here are my goodie pages. There are tons of links to everything that I've talked about here that I think are useful. Not only that I have a page dedicated to TPACK, but also the other integration models. And then finally, at the very end, I have my link to my evaluation, which I'll read out real quick because it's case sensitive. It's lowercase t period ly /GGZ as in zebra, uppercase K on here. As a reminder, thank you so much. I'm Kushan Hopkins. I'm joined here with Kurt Bernhardt. Together we make the technology team. You can email us at techteam@opsrc.net. The slides are here, and you can always get this recording and these slides at opsrc.net/TechTalks. And for right now, I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. I'll take questions.